Well, howdy, folks. Now, I got a question for you. What do you get when you cross three British blokes working at a garage, a military contract worth millions, and the kind of brass that would make a Texas oil baron blush? You get one of the most legendary cons in military history and a sniper rifle that's been dropping bad guys for over 4 decades. We're talking about a rifle so good it holds a world record for the longest confirmed kill at nearly 1.5 miles. But here's the crazy true fact. It all started in what was basically a glorified tool shed. So, picture this, it's the early 1980s and the British Army's got a problem. They're still using Lee-Enfield rifles for their snipers, guns that were designed back when your great-granddaddy was learning to drive a Model T. Sure, they've been upgraded over the years, but asking a modern sniper to use a World War I rifle is like asking a NASCAR driver to race a horse and buggy. The Falklands War in 1982 made it crystal clear. Britain needed a proper purpose-built sniper rifle, and they needed it yesterday. So in 1985, they put out the call for a new sniper system to replace those old Lee-Enfields. Big names threw their hats in the ring: Remington, Parker Hale, companies with decades of experience, and factories that could churn out rifles like a McDonald's churns out burgers. But sometimes, folks, David beats Goliath. Sometimes 3 guys in a shed beat the entire defense industry. Let me introduce you to our unlikely heroes. First up, we got Dave Walls and David Cage, 2 tool makers who've been tinkering around in their garage making replica Colt revolvers. Now, these weren't your average weekend warriors. These boys were craftsmen and the kind who could look at a picture in a book and build you a gun so accurate you would swear it came straight from the Colt factory. In fact, they were so good at what they did that Colt themselves told them they should get into the firearms business. Like Gordon Ramsay telling you you're cooking so good you should open a restaurant. You don't ignore advice like that. Then there's Malcolm Cooper. This fella's important to our story too. See, Malcolm wasn't just any old shooter, he was an Olympic champion. The kind of marksman who could put a bullet through a dime at 100 yards and give you change. Gold medals in 1984 and 1988, 7 world championship golds, and 14 European championship golds. That's a lot of gold. When Malcolm Cooper talked about rifles, people listened. Malcolm had seen Dave's work on those Colt replicas, and he was impressed. So impressed, in fact, he convinced them to build a target rifle. They did, and Malcolm went out and shot a world record with the thing. And that right there is when the British military started to pay attention. Now, here's where things get interesting. The military saw Malcolm's success and thought, hey, maybe these guys are onto something. So they invited Accuracy International, which at this point, keep in mind, was just 3 guys in a dream, to submit a rifle for the British infantry trials. Dave Walls later said they thought they were going crazy. Here they were, having built maybe 3 or 4 rifles in their entire lives, and they're entering a competition against 17 other companies. Companies with real factories, real employees, and real experience building military weapons. But here's the thing about the rifle they'd built. It was built different. While everyone else was trying to modify existing designs, the Daves had built something from the ground up. They called it the Precision Marksman, or PM for short, and it was unlike anything the military had ever seen before. The rifle featured a chassis system, which meant everything was bolted directly to the receiver instead of being permanently attached like traditional rifles. This made it modular. If something broke, you could swap it out instead of sending the whole rifle back to the factory. For a military that needed weapons they could maintain in the field, this right here was revolutionary. The barrel was free-floating, meaning nothing touched it that could mess with its harmonics, and previous military rifles had full-length wooden stocks that had to be carefully bedded to maintain accuracy. The PM didn't have that problem. It was accurate right out of the box. The trials started with 17 competitors. Pretty quickly, that number dropped to 8, then to 5, and somehow against all the odds, these 3 guys from a garage kept making the cut. Dave Walls said he started getting a little worried at this point because he realized they might actually win this thing, and if they won, they were going to look mighty foolish when the military came to inspect their factory. See, the contract was for 1,212 rifles. That's not a number you knock out in your spare time in a garage. That's industrial scale production, the kind that requires skilled workers, proper machinery, and a factory that doesn't double as a storage for your lawnmower. But the rifle kept performing, and test after test, the PM outshot the competition. It was more accurate, more reliable, and more innovative than anything the big companies had brought to the table. The military evaluators were impressed. This little company from nowhere had built something quite special. Then came the moment of truth. Accuracy International, indeed, won the contract. Now, most people in this situation would probably come clean. They'd say, Look, we're honored you chose our rifle, but we're gonna need some time to scale up production. But Dave Walls, David Cage, and Malcolm Cooper weren't most people. They decided to fake it till they made it. The military wanted to inspect their manufacturing facility, standard procedure to make sure they weren't dealing with, and I quote, 3 guys in a shed, which, of course, is exactly what they were. But what did they do? They rented an industrial warehouse for a few days, gathered up all their tools, their little rifle parts, everything that looked remotely professional, and they staged the most elaborate fake factory in military procurement history. We're talking they laid out workbenches, scattered rifle components in various stages of completion, and arranged tools to make it look like they had proper production line. When the military inspectors showed up, the 3 of them rushed through the facility as fast as humanly possible. Oh yeah, here's where we machine the barrels. Over here's where we assemble the actions. Oh, that's our quality control station. All while praying the inspectors wouldn't look too closely or ask too many questions. And then, in a stroke of genius, they suggested lunch. Gentlemen, all this touring has made me hungry. Why don't we grab a bite to eat? Then they hustled those inspectors out of there faster than a politician running from a scandal. Over lunch, the inspectors were actually complimenting them on their operation. Really impressive setup you got there. This was mostly just a formality. We wanted to make sure you guys weren't 3 guys working out of a garage or a shed or something. Dave Walls said he nearly choked on his sandwich. Here they were, literally 3 guys who had been working out of a shed, and they just convinced the British military they were a legitimate defense contractor. But winning the contract was just the beginning of their problems. Remember, the military wanted 1,212 rifles, and they wanted them in a reasonable time frame. There was no way 3 guys, even working around the clock, could produce that many rifles. Well, they did what any sensible small business would do. They subcontracted the work. The contract went to Pylon Industries, a company that specialized in high-tech missiles. On paper, that made sense. Pylon had the manufacturing capability, the precision machinery, and the government clearances needed for military work. There's just one problem. Pylon wasn't a gun company. They were missile guys. Missiles and rifles are, well, they're about as similar as a Formula One car and a combine harvester. Yeah, they both are machines, but that's kind of where the similarity ends. Now, Pylon looked at the blueprints for the PM and decided they knew better than the guys who designed it. They started making, quote-unquote, improvements, the kind of improvements that would make any engineer break out in a cold sweat. The original measurements were in freedom units. Well, no problem. They just convert everything to metric. Never mind that converting measurements isn't always a straight mathematical exercise. Sometimes those seemingly odd numbers exist for very specific reasons. Part looked too complicated to machine? They just cast it instead. That was faster, cheaper, and hey, what could go wrong? The specified steel alloy was expensive? They'd substitute something cheaper that looked similar on paper. Like watching someone try to improve a Stradivarius violin by replacing the wood with plywood and the strings with fishing line. Technically, it might still make noise, but I'm not sure if it's going to sound like music. Now, when the first batch of rifles came back from Pylon, they were disasters waiting to happen. Some wouldn't fire at all. Others would fire without anyone pulling the trigger, which, as you might imagine, is not a feature you want in a military weapon. But the worst problem was a firing pin. Pylon had used a different alloy than specified, and the firing pin started breaking right at the cocking piece. When that happened, the spring would push the firing pin too far forward, and it would detonate a cartridge while it was being chambered. Now, in a properly functioning rifle, the bolt locks closed before the cartridge fires, containing all that explosive energy and directing it down the barrel. When a cartridge goes off with the bolt not fully closed, well, that energy's got to go somewhere, and that somewhere is usually back towards the shooter. And that, my friends, is exactly what happened to a British Marine during testing. The rifle essentially exploded in his hands, severely wounding him. The military immediately issued a cease and desist order. If you got one of these rifles, stop shooting it, like, right now. You can imagine how Dave Walls and David Cage felt when they got that phone call. Their dream rifle, the one who had beaten all the competition, was now a safety hazard that had put a soldier in the hospital. But right here's where the story gets interesting again. Pylon, suddenly realizing they're in deep trouble, became a lot more willing to work with the original designers. Dave Walls and David Cage took back control of the project, and they had 6 weeks to figure out what had gone wrong and then promptly fix it. Now, folks, 6 weeks to diagnose problems in over 100 rifles. I mean, talking identify the root causes and then implement fixes. In the defense industry, 6 weeks is barely enough time to schedule a meeting, let alone solve a major safety issue. These guys weren't defense industry bureaucrats, they were craftsmen who understood their design inside and out. They worked around the clock, examining every rifle, every component, every detail. They found all Pylon's improvements and systematically undid them, returning the rifles to the original specs. And wouldn't you know it worked. The rifles came back from Accuracy International functioning exactly as they were supposed to. The military tested them again, and this time, everything worked perfectly. PM was back on track. Pylon, meanwhile, those guys, they went bankrupt shortly after. Turns out when you nearly kill a soldier with a defective weapon, it's kind of bad for business. Yeah, who would have thought? But you know what, let's talk about what made this rifle so special. Because the PM, which became the L96A1 in British service, wasn't just another sniper rifle. This thing was a revolution in precision shooting. First off, that chassis system I mentioned earlier, man, most rifles of the era were built around wooden or fiberglass stocks with the action bedded into the stock material. If something went wrong, you had to send the whole rifle back to the armorer. The L96A1's chassis meant you could swap out components in the field. Barrel goes bad? Unbolt it, put a new one in. Trigger group acting up? Pop it out and replace it. The rifle was chambered in 7.62 by 51mm NATO. It's a cartridge that's been proven in combat for decades with enough power to reach out and touch someone at a serious distance while still being manageable for the shooter. The barrel was 26 inches long and free-floated, meaning it didn't touch the stock anywhere along its length. This eliminated the harmonics issues that plagued traditional rifles. When you fire a rifle, the barrel vibrates like a tuning fork. If something's touching that barrel, it changes those vibrations and it affects accuracy. The L96A1's free-floating barrel meant consistent accuracy shot after shot. The action was a bolt-action design, which might seem old-fashioned in an era of semi-automatic rifles, but for precision shooting, bolt actions have advantages. They are inherently more accurate because there's no gas system or moving parts to affect the barrel harmonics. There's also more reliability there. Fewer moving parts means fewer things that can break. The rifle fed from a 10-round detachable magazine, which was a nice improvement over the single-shot or internal magazine systems common at the time. And the entire package weighed in at about 14 pounds with scope. Heavy enough to be stable, but not heavy enough that a sniper couldn't carry it all day. Now folks, success breeds success, and pretty soon other countries came knocking. The Swedish military was in a similar position to the British. They needed something to replace their World War II-era rifles with something modern. But Sweden had a unique requirement. Their military operates in some of the coldest conditions on Earth, where temps can drop to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. At those temperatures, metal contracts. Lubricants turn to sludge, and mechanisms that work fine in temperate climates seize up solid. So Accuracy International modified their design for Arctic conditions. They milled the bolt to reduce surface area that could freeze together. They enlarged the trigger guard so soldiers could operate it while wearing heavy winter gloves, and they changed lubricants and adjusted tolerances to account for extreme cold. This modified version became the Arctic Warfare, or AW. Sweden adopted it as the PSG-90, and it performed flawlessly in conditions that would stop most rifles cold, literally. The British liked the improvements so much, they adopted the Arctic Warfare as the L118A1, placing their original L96A1s, and because sometimes a student becomes a teacher. But Accuracy International was not done innovating. They realized that while 7.62 by 51mm NATO was a fine cartridge, there were situations where you needed more power and longer range. So they developed the Arctic Warfare Magnum, or AWM. The AWM was chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, a cartridge that's basically one step down from 50 BMG in terms of power. This thing could reach out to distances that would make even a .308 shooter weep with envy. The British adopted the AWM as the L115A3, and it was this rifle that would make history in Afghanistan. In 2009, Corporal Craig Harrison of the Blues and Royals was on patrol in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, when his unit was ambushed by Taliban fighters. 2 machine gun teams had his patrol pinned down, and they were too far away from most weapons to engage effectively. Harrison? Well, he set up his L115A3 and began engaging the enemy. The range was extreme. We're talking about 2,475 meters, or about a mile and a half. That's so far that the curvature of the Earth starts to become a factor in your calculations. Insane. At that distance, the bullets were traveling over 6 seconds before impact. Harrison had to aim at 6 feet high and 20 inches to the side to compensate for bullet drop and wind drift. The rounds were moving so slowly that by the time they reached the target, Taliban had been wearing body armor, it probably would have stopped them. Now, Harrison fired 9 shots to establish where his bullets were landed. Then he began engaging the enemy. His first target was a Taliban fighter who had knocked the head off a water pump to flood the field and slow down the British advance. Harrison took him out with a single shot. Then he engaged the machine gun teams. His first shot missed, but his second shot found its mark. The Taliban fighter dropped, and with him, the world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. Harrison later said he wasn't even trying to hit him. He was just trying to suppress him and make him run away. But when you're shooting a rifle as accurate as the L115A3, sometimes suppressive fire becomes precision fire. Now today, the Accuracy International rifles are used by military and police forces in over 60 countries. What started as three fellas in a shed has become one of the most respected names in precision shooting. The company Dave Wells and David Cage built has produced rifles that have served in every major conflict since the 1980s. But here's what really gets me jazzed about this story. It's not just about the rifles, though they are impressive pieces of engineering. Well, it's about what happens when craftsmanship meets opportunity. When three guys who genuinely cared about building the best possible rifle got a chance to prove it. See, the big defense contractors were playing it safe, modifying existing designs and relying on their established relationships. But the Daves were building something new, something better. They weren't constrained by the "that's how we always have done it" or corporate bureaucracy. They just wanted to build the best dang rifle they could. Now let's talk about what Accuracy International offers today, because they didn't just rest on their laurels after that first success. The current lineup, well, that reads like a sniper's wish list. The AW series comes in multiple configurations. You've got your standard AW in 7.62 by 51mm NATO, still the bread and butter of military snipers worldwide. Then there's the AWF with a folding stock for paratroopers and special ops folks who need something a little more compact. The AWP, the Arctic Warfare Police, was designed for law enforcement use, and it's got plain black furniture instead of military green. And this thing's optimized for shorter ranges that police snipers typically engage at. We're talking 100 to 200 meters instead of 800 to 1,000 meter engagements that most military snipers might face. Then you got the AWS, Arctic Warfare Suppress, which comes with an integral suppressor. This thing is whisper quiet, perfect for situations when you need to take a shot without announcing your position to everyone within a mile radius. But the real monster in the lineup is the AWM, the Arctic Warfare Magnum. This beast comes in the 300 Winchester Magnum, 338 Lapua Magnum, and even 50 caliber BMG, for when you absolutely positively need to reach out and touch someone at extreme range. The 338 Lapua version, that's the L115A3 that set the distance record. This thing pushes a 250 grain bullet at about 2,900 feet per second. At 1,000 yards, that bullet's still carrying for over 1,800 foot-pounds of energy. For comparison, a .44 Magnum at the muzzle only produces about 1,200 foot-pounds. This thing gets like a freight train even at extreme range. But what really sets these rifles apart ain't just the accuracy, though they will consistently shoot sub-MOA groups, meaning all your shots will land within a 1-inch circle at 100 yards. It's the attention to detail and the innovations that other manufacturers have spent decades trying to copy. Take the trigger system. Accuracy International developed a 2-stage trigger that breaks like a glass rod. First stage takes up the slack, and then there's a clean, crisp break with minimal over travel. It's adjustable from 3 to 5 pounds, which gives the shooter precise control without being so light that it's dangerous in field conditions. The bolt's a thing of beauty. It's a 3-lug design that locks up tighter than a miser's purse strings. The bolt face is recessed to fully enclose a cartridge head, which means even if you have catastrophic case failure, the gas and debris are directed away from the shooter's face. Smart. And the barrel attachment system here is pure genius. Instead of threading the barrel into action like most rifles, the AW series uses a barrel extension that locks into the receiver with interrupted threads. This means you can swap barrels in the field without any special tools, and the headspace, that's the distance between the bolt face and the chamber, remains consistent every time. Of course, Accuracy International isn't 3 guys in a shed anymore. They got a proper factory in Portsmouth, England, with CNC machines, quality control systems, and all the trappings of a modern manufacturing operation. But they managed to maintain that craftsmanship's attention to detail that made them famous in the first place. Thank God. Now, each rifle is still hand-assembled by skilled technicians, and the barrels are made by Lothar Walther in Germany, widely considered the best barrel makers in the world. The actions are machined from solid steel billets, not cast or forged, and every component is inspected multiple times during assembly. The company has also embraced modern technology. They use computer-aided design for new products, finite element analysis to optimize stress distribution, and advanced metallurgy to improve component life. But at its heart, it's still a company that believes in building the best possible rifle, regardless of cost. Now, my friends, success breeds imitation, and pretty soon every rifle manufacturer was trying to build their own version of the AW. Now, some came close. The Shaytac M200, the Barrett M98B, the Remington MSR here, but none quite captured the combination of accuracy, reliability, and modularity that made the AW series so special. Part of the problem is that building a rifle like this ain't just about copying the design, it's about understanding why each component is the way that it is, how it works together as a system, and what compromises are acceptable. The big manufacturers tried to build AW competitors on the cheap, using existing components and manufacturing processes. But you can't build a Rolls-Royce using Chevrolet parts and expect the same results. Accuracy International, meanwhile, kept innovating. They developed the AX series with even more modularity, allowing users to swap not just barrels, but entire calibers by changing the bolt, barrel, and magazine. They created the AT series too, for civilian shooters who wanted AW performance at a lower price point. Now you might be wondering why I'm spending so much time talking about a British rifle company. Well, here's the thing. Accuracy International has had a huge impact on American shooting sports and military procurement. U.S. Special Operations Command has been buying AW rifles for decades. They're used by Army Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, and Air Force Special Operations. When American Special Ops needs a precision rifle, they often choose British engineering. The rifles have also influenced American manufacturers here too. Companies like LaRue Tactical, JP Enterprises, and others have incorporated AW-inspired features into their own designs. The chassis system, free-floating barrels, and modular construction that Accuracy International pioneered are now standard features on high-end American rifles. So what can we learn from Accuracy International's story? First, innovation often comes from unexpected places. The big defense contractors with their armies of engineers and unlimited budgets got beat by 3 guys who just wanted to build a better rifle. And second to that is quality matters. Dave Walls and David Cage could have cut corners, used cheaper materials, or simplified the design to make manufacturing easier, but instead they built the best rifle they know how to build. And that commitment to excellence is what made them successful. And third, sometimes you gotta fake it till you make it. Those 3 guys had no business winning a military contract, but they had the confidence to try and the skills to deliver when it mattered. But here's what I think is the most important part of this story. It's about people. Dave Walls and David Cage weren't trying to get rich or build a defense empire. They were craftsmen who saw a problem and wanted to solve it. Malcolm Cooper wasn't just looking for fame and fortune. He just wanted a rifle that'd help him shoot better. And the British military evaluators who chose the PM over rifles from established manufacturers took a huge risk. They could have played it safe, gone with a known quantity from a big company. Instead, they chose the best rifle regardless of who made it. And another shout out to Craig Harrison, the sniper who set the distance record, as he wasn't trying to make history. He was just doing his job, protecting his fellow soldiers. The fact that he broke a world record in the process is almost incidental. Now today, Dave Walls and David Cage are still involved with Accuracy International, though the company has grown far beyond what they probably imagined back in that garage in the 1970s. Malcolm Cooper passed away in 2001. But his influence on the company and the sport of precision shooting continues far beyond. The rifles they created have saved countless lives, ended conflicts, and pushed the boundaries of what's possible with precision shooting. From that first world record Malcolm Cooper set with their target rifle to Craig Harrison's incredible shot in Afghanistan, Accuracy International rifles have been there for the shots that matter most. Maybe the most impressive thing about this whole story is that it started with 3 guys who just wanted to make something better. They didn't have a business plan or venture capital or government contracts. They just had an idea, skills to execute it, and the brass to try. In a world where everything seems to be made by the committees, designed by focus groups, and built to the lowest common denominator, the Accuracy International story reminds us that sometimes the best solutions come from people who care more about excellence than profit margins. So the next time someone tells you you can't compete with the big boys, that you need fancy facilities and unlimited budgets to build something great, remember Dave Walls, David Cage, and Malcolm Cooper. Remember the rifle that once held the world record for the longest confirmed kill, started life in a garage in England built by 3 guys who just wanted to make something great. And remember that sometimes the best way to fool the military is to give them exactly what they need, even if they don't know they need it yet. Now, if you enjoy learning about 3 guys in a shed and how they changed military history, hit that like button harder than a .338 Lapua hitting steel at 2,000 yards. You know the sound. Subscribe for more stories about the firearms that shaped our world and drop a comment below. I want to hear about your favorite underdog success stories. Until next time, keep your powder dry, groups tight, and remember, sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. Y'all come back now, you hear?